second cup of coffee.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you're in. Welcome back to Sip&Talk.
Hi.
I'm Joe.
Welcome.
Welcome to the Sip&Talk studio. So glad to be back with all of our Sip&Talkers today. We have got a really wild situation to unpack.
Oh, man, we really do. So you heard about the big trip last week, right? Jensen Huang traveling over to Beijing with Trump.
Oh, yeah, massive high-profile visit. Everybody was watching that.
Exactly. But here's the crazy part. Right after they literally step foot out of the country, Beijing turns around and suddenly bans NVIDIA's gaming graphics cards.
I mean, talk about a slap in the face.
Right. And you just know he is pulling his hair out over this. He desperately wants to sell those high-end H200 chips over there to make a profit.
Because it's a huge market for them.
Exactly. And the U.S. government finally gave him the green light to sell some of them. But now the Chinese government has just slammed the door shut to force all their domestic companies to buy local Huawei chips instead.
Which puts him in just the most awkward, impossible position, caught right between two massive powers.
It really does. So today, we are unpacking what's actually happening behind the scenes here. We're looking at the anti-West rhetoric versus the actual jobless reality on the ground.
Yeah, the brutal truth of economic decoupling.
Right. We're getting into the structural reshuffling of foreign capital, the chip war, and this ruthless kind of invisible thing that analysts are calling the starvation war.
It is so intense, and I think to really understand Jensen's dilemma, we have to look at why these American export controls might actually be, accidentally creating a total monster.
Yeah, let's get into that, because when people think of NVIDIA, they just think of the physical computer chips.
Yeah.
But their real secret weapon, their absolute biggest moat, is their software, right?
Exactly. It's this software ecosystem called CUDA. Basically, every developer around the world uses CUDA to talk to the AI hardware.
It's like the operating system for AI.
Pretty much, yeah. And the original goal from Washington with all these export controls was to stop China from developing a software ecosystem that could compete with CUDA.
By cutting off the physical chips.
Right. The logic was, if you can't get the world-class chips, you can't build the world-class software.
But the irony here is just off the charts. By strictly blocking access to those high-end NVIDIA chips, the U.S. has basically built this giant protective umbrella for Huawei.
Yeah, they really did.
Yeah.
Because now, these Chinese tech firms, they literally can't buy from NVIDIA anymore. So they are completely forced to adopt Huawei's native chips, like their Ascend series.
Which means the entire country's resources, all their developers, are forced to optimize Huawei's software.
It's all hands on deck for Huawei now.
Right. I mean, it's like, imagine you have a major rival, right? And
Yeah.
to punish them, you lock them inside a gym.
Okay, a gym.
Yeah, you lock the door so they can't get out and bother you. But then a year later, you realize, wait, they've just been lifting weights this whole time, and now they're completely ripped.
That is such a good way to put it. You force them to get stronger.
Exactly. Is the short-term restriction really worth the long-term risk? Because projections are saying Huawei's ecosystem could hit like 70 or 80% of CDA's capabilities in just 3 years.
And 3 years in the tech world is nothing. That is incredibly fast. We might be forcing them to build a tech behemoth that threatens our own tech dominance long term.
So then you have to ask, why would the U.S. do this in the first place if it's so risky?
Right. And to understand that, we have to look at the history of intellectual property theft and this super modern tactic called AI distillation.
Oh man, AI distillation. We really need to translate these terms because they sound so sterile, but what's actually happening is wild. Let's do the cabbage analogy for IP theft first.
Yes, please. Break down the cabbage.
Okay, so imagine you spend 10 years waking up at 4 a.m. every single day to breed this incredible, perfect golden cabbage.
Just a beautiful, majestic cabbage.
Exactly. And you write down all your secrets in this recipe book. But then your lazy neighbor Wang sneaks over in the middle of the night, steals your seeds, steals your notes, opens an identical restaurant right next door, and claims your land.
And then he has the nerve to call it tech sharing.
Right. And that is exactly how Western companies feel. They spend billions on R&D only to have it ripped off through forced transfers or hacks.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating. And now, apply that exact same concept to artificial intelligence with AI distillation.
How does that work in everyday terms?
Okay, think of it like a restaurant making a really rich bone broth. They boil premium beef bones for 3 straight days.
Which takes a ton of time and energy.
Exactly. That represents the massive data and compute costs of training a huge AI model. So you go and buy a $30 bowl of this amazing soup, you take it home, and you use chemistry to reverse engineer the exact flavor profile. That's distillation.
Wow. Okay, so you skip the 3 days of boiling entirely.
Right. You just make a cheap $5 chemical copycat version, open up a shop next door, and you completely bankrupt the original creator.
But wait, if I bought the bowl of soup, don't I have the right to eat it?
You bought the right to eat it, yeah. You didn't buy the commercial right to clone the recipe and put them out of business.
That makes total sense, because if everybody just clones a soup, who is going to spend 3 days boiling real bones anymore? We would all just end up drinking cheap chemical water.
Exactly. Innovation would just completely stop. And that brings us to why the international community realized that, playing nice just wasn't working anymore.
Which leads to this strategy the analysts call starve the wolf.
Starve the wolf. It sounds harsh, but we really need to define what the wolf is here. We are not talking about normal, innocent global trade.
Right.
The wolf represents an authoritarian system that just refuses to play by intellectual property rules. They steal the tech, and then they use state subsidies to dump cheap products everywhere.
But it wasn't always a wolf, right? Like, decades ago, this relationship kind of worked.
It did. Decades ago, they were doing low-tech assembly, making toys, putting together basic electronics. It was like having a helpful guard dog that was happy eating scraps.
Right. But now, fueled by all this copied AI, the dog grew into a massive wolf. And it wants to bite the owner and completely dominate the ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you handle a wolf? You can't just go in and shoot it. That would start a massive conflict.
So you cut off its food supply, you starve it.
There we go. You lock the kitchen door. By putting up strict U.S. investment bans and export controls, you break that AI distillation cycle we just talked about.
So if they want high-end AI, they literally have to build the physical chips and train the models from scratch inside their own heavily censored, closed system.
Yep. Without the West's, basically, tech breast milk, their bloated ecosystem will eventually just starve out.
I mean, when you frame it like that, starving the wolf doesn't really sound cruel. It just sounds like a highly precise defense mechanism to protect genuine innovation.
It really is. But of course, locking the kitchen door on high tech has massive ripple effects on the everyday economy.
Oh, absolutely. And on the nationalist rhetoric, we see screaming across the internet every day.
Let's talk about the foreign direct investment, or FDI, because the money isn't just leaving, it's structurally splitting in a very weird way.
Right, it's an asymmetric diversion. So first, you have the high-tech flight. Sensitive stuff like semiconductors, AI, quantum computing, that money is sprinting for the exits.
Sprinting.
Because of the U.S. investment restrictions and this trend of friendshoring, moving factories to places like Vietnam, India, Mexico.
The whole model totally shifted. It used to be make it in China for the global market. Now it's make it in China strictly for China.
But then you have the low-tech retention, the low-tech stuff, consumer goods, basic manufacturing. That money is actually staying put.
Because they have complete supply chains. And you just can't ignore a market of 1.4 billion consumers.
You really can't. You have the actual data on this where the numbers are pretty jarring.
Yeah, so looking at the numbers, in 2025, FDI dropped 9.5%, which brought it down to roughly 747.6 billion RMB. And then Q1 of 2026, it dropped another 7.3%.
Wow, so the money is bleeding out.
But here is the wild part. New foreign enterprises actually grew by 19.1%.
Wait, really? Less total money, but more companies. How does that work?
It's because they are taking a highly selective, super cautious approach. High tech still took about 32% of the pie, but the truly sensitive tech is definitively decoupling. They're just opening smaller, low-risk outposts now.
Which brings us to the most brutal contradiction of this whole thing. You go online, and netizens are just screaming, "Get out, foreign capital, we don't need you."
Right, all that intense nationalist pride.
But simultaneously, they are suffering from a massive, crippling youth unemployment crisis, especially in the IT and tech sectors.
Yeah, because the low-tech jobs that are staying, making shoes or basic goods, those don't bring high wage growth or tech advancement.
It's just so tragic. Imagine sitting there, typing angrily on your smartphone about how much you hate foreign tech, while desperately refreshing your email, hoping a foreign tech firm will hire you.
The internet rhetoric is just living in a completely parallel universe to the jobless reality on the ground.
And it's not just economic policies pushing the capital away, right? It's the physical, real-world bullying of neighboring countries. Capital absolutely hates geopolitical risk.
Oh, totally. The wolf strategy isn't just about economics. They use these gray zone tactics that experts call salami slicing.
Salami slicing, that's such a great visual.
It is. You basically alter the status quo by taking tiny incremental slices. Nothing big enough to start an all-out war, but eventually the whole salami is just gone.
And we are seeing this all over the map right now. Look at Taiwan. Constant military drills, ships crossing the median line, airspace incursions, economic coercion.
And then look at Japan. Constant incursions into the Senkaku Islands. And whenever Japan supports Taiwan, boom, economic retaliation.
But it gets so physical down in Southeast Asia. The Philippines and Vietnam, they are dealing with massive water cannons, literal boat ramming.
Yeah, these maritime militias are just blocking local fishing and oil exploration right in the South China Sea.
And what does all this bullying actually achieve? It just terrifies the neighbors and forces them to ally with the US, Japan, and Australia.
Exactly. You see the Quad and Ayushik getting stronger every day. They are basically ruining their own global image.
Because true regional leadership is built on mutual respect, not fear. A bully always eventually finds himself standing totally alone on the playground.
They really do. Here's the hardest part of all this. How do we communicate this reality to people who are completely trapped inside that nationalist echo chamber?
It is so tough. But the one thing you absolutely cannot do is attack them or call them brainwashed.
Never. That immediately triggers defense mechanisms. They will just shut down and stop listening to you.
Right. You have to use empathy. You show them their own official data, show them the 9.5% drop in FDI, show them their own government's youth unemployment numbers.
Let them see the massive gap between the grand, glorious narrative on TV and their own empty wallets.
Exactly. Let them connect the dots themselves. Because at the end of the day, Sip&Talkers, we don't explore these heavy issues to incite conflict or criticize any specific country or its people.
Not at all. Our goal is always just to uncover the objective truth and the underlying logic that gets hidden beneath all those loud populist slogans.
Because everyday people are the ones who suffer when these grand geopolitical games are played. So I want to leave you with a provocative thought to ponder this week.
Yeah, think about this. Imagine a future where the everyday people across the ocean finally shake off this collective hypnosis.
What would happen if they gained the courage to look past the grand national narratives, to see the brutal truth of the world, and finally earn the right to choose their own true future?
It's a really powerful thing to imagine.
It really is. And we would love to hear what you think about all this. Please write in or leave a comment with your thoughts on the chip war, capital flows, anything we talked about today.
And if you enjoyed today's deep dive, strongly urge you to subscribe to the Sip and Talk podcast so you never miss a conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, a very special shout out to our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickey to Life. Definitely go check out Mickey's latest travel vlog. It is awesome.
Yes, highly recommend it.
Thanks for listening to Sip and Talk today. See you next time.